on April 22, 1942, Lieutenant Commander Edward Butch O'Hare, a 27-year-old Medal of Honor recipient with 7 confirmed kills, walked into the Grumman factory in Bethpage, New York. He wasn't there for a publicity tour. He was there because American pilots were dying in the F4F Wildcat, an aircraft that couldn't match the speed or maneuverability of the Japanese Zero. The engineer waiting for him was William Schwendler, Grumman's chief designer, who had been working on a Wildcat replacement since a contract was signed 6 months before Pearl Harbor. The Wildcat was too slow, with a maximum speed of 318 miles an hour versus the Zero's 350 miles an hour. It couldn't climb as fast, nor could it turn with the Zero, which could complete a full circle in roughly half the time a Wildcat needed. American doctrine was clear. Wildcat pilots must never turn with the Zero. They were instructed to use speed and altitude for hit-and-run attacks. However, the Wildcat wasn't fast enough to reliably execute this doctrine. Zeros could catch them in a climb or follow them through a dive. This narrow performance gap was forcing American pilots into losing turning fights, and the Navy had lost 42 Wildcats in the first 4 months of the war. While the official reports blamed pilot error and a failure to follow doctrine, O'Hare knew the truth. The aircraft was the problem. The Wildcat was a good plane for 1941, but the Japanese had 2 years to perfect their Zero tactics since 1940. O'Hare had credibility, having single-handedly defended the carrier Lexington on February 20, 1942, shooting down 5 Japanese bombers in under 5 minutes, an action that earned him the Medal of Honor. Having survived 14 combat missions flying the Wildcat, he knew its limitations intimately. The Bureau of Aeronautics sent O'Hare to Grumman with a simple mission: tell the engineers everything the Zero could do, what the Wildcat couldn't, and what American pilots desperately needed in the next fighter. O'Hare spent 4 hours with Schwendler and the design team. He described Zero tactics in detail, how they used superior climb rates to maintain altitude advantage, how they baited pilots into turns, and their exceptional range. He also detailed Wildcat deficiencies, including sluggish controls, inadequate power, poor visibility, and the narrow, hand-cranked landing gear that made carrier operations dangerous. But O'Hare also highlighted the Wildcat's strengths. It was tough, capable of absorbing damage that would destroy a Zero. It had armor protection for the pilot and self-sealing fuel tanks. One good burst from its 650 caliber machine guns usually meant a dead Zero. The problem was getting into position to fire that burst. O'Hare emphasized the need for better performance, more speed, more power, better climb rate, better visibility, and easier handling. The Wildcat's engine produced 1,200 horsepower. O'Hare told Schwendler the new fighter needed at least 2,000 horsepower to climb faster and outrun the Zero at all altitudes. Schwendler noted that the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine producing 2,000 horsepower was already being used in the F4U Corsair. O'Hare urged them to use it, stating that the entire Pacific Air War depended on matching or exceeding Zero performance. Other critical improvements O'Hare listed included a higher cockpit for better all-around visibility, hydraulic landing gear that extended with the flip of a switch, and additional armor. O'Hare's 4-hour meeting and Schwendler's 18 pages of notes led to a radical redesign. 4 days later, on April 26, 1942, the Bureau of Aeronautics sent Grumman a directive to install the R2800 engine in the second XF6F prototype, redesign the airframe, mount the cockpit higher, and install hydraulic landing gear and additional armor. Schwendler's team redesigned the aircraft designated the XF6F3 in just 8 weeks. The new engine required a larger mount and a bigger propeller. The new prototype, which grew larger and heavier, was still faster and more powerful. On July 30, 1942, test pilot Robert Hall took the XF6F3 on its first flight. Hall landed, telling Schwendler it was outstanding, like a Wildcat with twice the power. After quickly addressing minor issues like engine overheating and slow landing gear extension, the first production F6F Hellcat took its first flight on October 3, 1942. By summer 1943, Grumman was producing 500 Hellcats a month, incorporating every change O'Hare recommended. The Hellcat was dramatically superior to the Wildcat, It was bigger but faster, with a maximum speed of 380 miles an hour versus 318 miles an hour. And it climbed much faster, 3,500 feet per minute versus 2,300 feet per minute. The massive 2,000 horsepower R-2800 engine made the difference. Lieutenant Commander Philip Torrey, commander of the 1st Hellcat Squadron VF9, told his pilots this aircraft would change everything. The days of running from zeros were over. Now they could fight. The Hellcat's combat debut came on August 31, 1943, during a strike on Marcus Island. Task Force 15, the first carrier group entirely equipped with Hellcats, caught the Japanese by surprise. The Hellcats were too fast for the anti-aircraft batteries and destroyed 6 aircraft on the ground in the first pass. The real test, however, was in the air. On October 5, 1943, Hellcats struck Wake Island and encountered 34 Zeros. The Hellcats shot down 22 Zeros while losing only 6 aircraft, achieving a kill ratio better than 3-to-1. The performance gap had reversed. The defining moment came on December 4, 1943, over Kwajalein Atoll. 91 Hellcats encountered 50 Zeros. The Zeros used their standard tactics, but they failed. The Hellcats were faster, climbed better, and had more power, allowing them to disengage from turning fights and follow Zeros through dives. In a 37-minute battle, the Hellcats shot down 28 Zeros while losing only 2 aircraft, a 14-to-1 kill ratio. The Hellcat was conclusively proven superior to the Zero. The Japanese noticed the change by late 1943. Even Japan's top ace, Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai, with 64 confirmed kills, discovered in February 1944 that his old tactics against the Wildcat did not work on the Hellcat. The Hellcat climbed faster than he expected, forcing him to break off and run for the first time in the war. Japanese intelligence found nothing unusual about the captured wreckage. The Hellcat was simply a better aircraft, with more power, better speed, and a stronger airframe designed specifically to outperform the Zero. The crisis for Japanese carrier aviation culminated on June 19, 1944, at the Battle of the Philippine Sea, which Hellcat pilots called the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. 4 massive Japanese raids were intercepted by 480 Hellcats. By the end of the day, the Japanese had lost 240 carrier aircraft. American losses were just 29, most to anti-aircraft fire. The kill ratio for the day was roughly 13-to-1. Japanese carrier aviation never recovered. Commander David McCampbell, an air group commander aboard the Essex, became an ace in a day on June 19th, shooting down 7 Japanese aircraft. He achieved that status again on October 24, 1944, during the Battle of Leyte Gulf, when he and his wingmen destroyed 15 aircraft in a single mission, the most successful 2-plane engagement in American aviation history. McCampbell finished the war with 34 aerial victories, all in Hellcats, becoming the Navy's all-time leading fighter ace and receiving the Medal of Honor. When Hellcat production ended in November 1945, Grumman had built 12,225 aircraft. The Hellcat achieved a 19-to-1 kill ratio against Japanese aircraft, and 75% of all Navy and Marine Corps aerial victories in the Pacific were soared by Hellcat pilots. 306 pilots became aces flying the Hellcat, more than any other American fighter. Only 270 Hellcats were lost in air-to-air combat during the entire war. Navy evaluations ranked the Hellcat at the top in most categories. It was faster, tougher, better armed, and easier to fly than the Zero. The only advantage the Zero retained was low-speed maneuverability, which became irrelevant because Hellcat pilots refused to engage in those fights. Ironically, Lieutenant Commander Edward O'Hare never knew the extent of his success. On November 26, 1943, he took off on a night combat air patrol mission in a Hellcat and disappeared during an engagement, presumed shot down by enemy or friendly fire. He died 18 months before the turkey shoot and was posthumously promoted to commander. In 1949, Chicago's Orchard Field Airport was renamed O'Hare International Airport in his honor. William Schwendler, who listened to O'Hare's demands, continued designing aircraft for Grumman, but never received public recognition for the Hellcat's design, dying in the early 1980s. However, a historian in 1991 discovered files confirming O'Hare's 4-hour meeting directly influenced the engine selection, cockpit visibility, and hydraulic landing gear. The historian estimated those design changes likely saved between 1,000 and 1,500 American pilots' lives. The story of the Hellcat proves that innovation in war doesn't happen just through bureaucracy, but through combat veterans who survive long enough to explain what works, engineers who listen and implement changes fast enough, and commanders who authorize radical modifications because lives depend on getting it right.